All right, today we are going to finish reading the story Little Red. Now, where we left off was here, when the wolf disguised himself as who? Little Red's grandmother. You're very right. Now, while we're reading, I want you to pay attention to how Little Red uses her eyes to see that the wolf is not her grandmother. Okay? All right. Okay, here we go. After some time, Little Red knocked at the door. Tap, tap, tap. Who's there? Cried the wolf, again disguising his voice. Little Red, hearing the big voice of the wolf, was worried. She thought to herself, that cold must have made grandmother's voice hoarse. It is your grandmother, Little Red, the wolf cried out to her, softening his voice as much as he could. Come in, sweet child. Little Red opened the door and headed straight to her grandmother's bedside. As she got close to the bed, she was frightened. Her grandmother didn't even look like herself. The cold had made her eyes look strange, and her nose was several times its normal size. Wow, so she saw her eyes and nose. Thinking that her grandmother's ears must also be stopped up, she moved closer and said in a loud voice, Grandmother, you don't look like yourself. What big eyes you have. All the better to see you with, my dear. So what did Little Red notice first about her grandmother? Right, the wolf's big, big eyes. Thinking her grandmother might not be able to see her very well, Little Red moved in a little closer. She noticed that her grandmother's sweet powder smell was missing. Grandmother, you don't smell like yourself. It's the eucalyptus I use for my cold, my dear. Little Red then reached for her grandmother's hand, but the wolf's paws didn't feel at all like her grandmother's soft hand. It was rough. Immediately, Little Red let go. She moved in a little closer and surveyed her grandmother's face more carefully. Grandmother, what big ears you have! All the better to hear with, my child. Grandmother, what big teeth you have! All the better to eat you up, growled the wolf as he jumped up from the bed and attempted to grab Little Red. Little Red jumped away in the nick of time. Thankfully, the wolf in his haste got all tangled up in Grandmother's nightgown. He tripped and fell flat on the floor, bumping his head as he hit the ground. He was knocked out. Little Red pulled her cell phone from the pocket of her cape and dialed 911. That's who you call in emergencies when something dangerous is happening. So if you're not safe or there's a fire or something dangerous is going on, you call 911. After she told the operator what had happened, she began to look for her grandmother. She glanced around the room. Her grandmother was nowhere in sight. She sniffed the air, but there was no hint of Grandmother's sweet powder, only the smell of eucalyptus. Eucalyptus is a type of flower, I think. Uh-oh. Little Red stood still and listened quietly in hopes of hearing her grandmother. Aha! What was that? She was sure she heard someone knocking. She used her ears to follow the sound and ended up by her grandmother's closet. She opened the door, and there was Grandmother. Little Red untied her, hugged her, and helped her back to bed. Oh, yay, Grandma! As Little Red watched the animal obedience school officer haul the wolf out to the wagon, she thought to herself, I sure learned an important lesson today. I will always trust my senses. The wolf didn't sound like my grandmother. He didn't look like my grandmother. He didn't smell like my grandmother, and he didn't feel like my grandmother. He was an imposter. My senses told me that. The end. Let's give our story a round of applause. Very good. All right, so let's go back to our story here. I'm gonna find this picture. Now, this is what I want you to look at, okay? So the wolf was disguised as Little Red's grandmother. What I want you to do is look at this picture and answer the question. What did Little Red see with her eyes that told her that the wolf was not her grandma? What did Little Red see with her eyes about the wolf that was not her grandmother?